Welcome to Wealth Talks, where we talk about solutions, money, and other things that create wealth in your life. Michelle, John, it's good to be back behind the mic, and let's broach a subject that we often hear, and that is, who is our niche? What is our niche audience that we try to target and work with?
So for years, we've been asked this question. So people come to visit us, whether it's people from the insurance company, directors, regionals, people from the home office, the president. We recently had a president of a life insurance company come visit us, or marketers. They all ask us, what's your niche audience? What is your target audience? What does your ideal client look like?
And it happened long before I was a life insurance agent. It happened when I was a chiropractor too. Well, what audience are you trying to reach? What group of people do you want to work with the most? And the truth of the matter is, we have a different way of defining that group than most people do.
Well, in the insurance industry, they often define it by what net worth individual or what income level. What income level, and or maybe a target profession that they're wanting to work with.
So I've heard agents say, well, I'm not going to work with anyone that can't spend at least $5,000 a year with me. It's just not worth my time. And other people say, well, I'm only going to work with people that are in the 30 and 40,000 range. And then I heard a presenter one time that only takes 10 clients a year and they have to be making at least $500,000 a year. So they've defined their niche very specifically based on finances.
Right.
Whereas we look at this completely different. I don't look at it as a financial decision. I look at it who out there needs to understand what I understand that has the same values that I have so that we can help them move forward financially.
So there's that key word you just said, and that is values. So we define more of our niche as based on our values.
So what does that mean to you? Well, no two people in the world have exactly the same values, but we value family, we value liberty, we value the God-given rights that are listed in the Constitution, that our government is prevented from interfering with our Constitution. We believe that everyone should have the opportunity to keep more of what they make instead of less. Those are the values that we're talking about. And not all of our clients match up with all of those values.
No.
And that doesn't matter. We have to align on certain ones of those, or they don't seem to really grasp the significance of what we're trying to share with them.
Yeah, so when we talk about our niche, our ideal client, it's more of a value system that we're talking about, not a numbers game. It's very similar to what we talk about when we're working with actual clients. We tell them not all decisions can be made on a spreadsheet.
That's right.
Yes.
Their values is a big ingredient in what it is that we're doing, whether that's at a business level, whether it's on an individual relationship level as we're working with each one of our clients. The values shine throughout that. And not only is it for the relationship we have with our clients who we're doing business with, but it's also how they're working with their families. Mm-hmm. If the values shine through, that's what perpetuates wealth in a family.
It is
the values. It's not necessarily all the spreadsheets and the figures that you do, the calculations that you do. Those are transient.
So before you guys usually talk to somebody about their numbers and about the process and all that, I get to talk to those people first, usually. There's a couple of us in our office that will take those calls of someone just coming in. And, I do have to ask, what is your income? How much do you have in savings? Those are important questions. But also equally important is, what are your goals? What is it that you would like to accomplish with your finances? I also find out if they have a family, if they're married, if they have children, because those things are very important. Because, we're going to deal with the numbers, but we've got to deal with the person and make sure that what we're showing them with the numbers fits their values and fits their needs as a family.
Yeah.
Yes.
And really these things mesh together, because as we're talking with a new person calling on the phone, we're asking about a lot of the facts, but the way that those facts are brought out, how we talk about them, is where the values are revealed in the process. So it's a combination. You can't separate one from the other. But it is definitely a combination. But both elements have to be there, or the recipe is not necessarily one for success.
Right. And then we also have single people that will call in. They don't have a family. They don't have a spouse. They don't have children. But they do have family type values. And they have values of creating for themselves, taking care of themselves so that they're not just a burden on society. And when they have those kind of values, then we can use these same things to implement to help them achieve what their goals are.
When we first started into the insurance industry, and as IBC, there was a strong focus on how this whole concept was going to eliminate the Federal Reserve Bank. And although I see the fallacy and the error that the Federal Reserve Bank has done to our currency, what it's done to demolish our currency, I realized that what I was doing individually, or what we were doing corporately, and especially with life insurance, was not going to annihilate or rid ourselves of the Federal Reserve, especially when many of the presidents and vice presidents of the insurance companies sit on the Federal Reserve Board.
Sure.
Okay, so that was a conflict in values that I realized, no, we're not teaching the elimination of the Federal Reserve, even though I don't really appreciate what the Federal Reserve has done to our currency.
And some of the techniques, even while some of the techniques can help us create a hedge against the effects.
That's what it does.
Sure,
So it's more on an individual basis.
Yes.
It comes back to what am I going to do individually? And that's a value. What can I do to make my economy better, rather than what can I pin out there and blame for the way my economy is going? So that's a value system different. If we're always looking to blame someone else, or if we're taking responsibility and pulling ourselves up by our own bootstraps.
Okay, so there's a couple other ways we could think of this. Let's think about the news that diabetes is on the rise, obesity is on the rise, and while we could think of all kinds of programs to take care of that, when we sit down at the table, or when we go to the grocery store, or when we order at the restaurant, we have choices that each of us can make on an individual basis that will greatly influence whether obesity, diabetes, heart disease is on the rise for our own self, or
Yes.
for our own family,
Yes.
or in our own household. So that's an example of that. Another one could be social media. It's tearing families apart. People are spending way too much time on social media. Well, rather than worrying about the whole society and what's happening, what can we do at home? Are we willing to put down the phone or turn off the social media and actually engage with the people that we live with? Or maybe they're not in our home. Maybe we pick up the phone, not on social media, but actually make a phone call to talk to that person, or to arrange a time to get together and do something. So again, this is thinking about what we can do for our own self, for our health medically, but also, social media. Also, what are we going to do with our own finances? While we would like to solve the whole world's problems, we actually start by solving our own. Mm-hmm. And that, is kind of a butterfly effect of reaching greater population.
Yeah. And sometimes when we go to solve our own problems, we realize the wisdom of solving our own problems rather than trying to solve the world's. Because our own problems expand to the world's is more than hundreds of times compounded.
Yes.
We never know how what we're doing individually or corporately as a family affects the whole world.
Oh, yes.
And like you said, the butterfly effect. It can have rippling effects around the world very easily. But if we don't take care of what we know we can do, then that same butterfly effect has a negative effect, just as impactful. And so one of the things that after you've talked to a new person that's contacting our office, Michelle, is I sit down and we have a one-to-one meeting. And one of the first questions that I ask them is, what is it that you would like to accomplish?
Oh yeah, that's important because we have to know what the goals are, what the values are, so that we can make our recommendations.
So, for instance, the other day we were talking to a newer call into our office, and his answer to that question was, well, in 7 years I want to have $1 million and retire. And of course, now the question is, what are you doing right now to create that $1 million? And nothing is being done. So are we even talking about something that is even in the realm of reality?
Oh, do you mean that person was not saving?
It wasn't saving anything.
Oh, not saving anything and wanting to go from 0 to $1 million in 7 years. Well, that's interesting.
And so then it comes, then we find out values here.
Right.
Because how does he expect to get that money? And his idea was through stocks and real estate and whatnot. And now we come to the value where people think that they can get rich off someone else's misfortune.
Oh.
So if someone else loses at the stock market, I can gain. Or if someone else loses in real estate, I can pick up a cheap deal. And we've got to be real careful with that mentality, because real capitalism is not a lose-win situation. It's a win-win situation where you're willing, John, to sell your piece of real estate to me because the money that I will pay you is worth more to you than the money, than the real estate, and the real estate is worth more to me than the capital I spent for it. So that's a value that comes out really quickly as I talk to people, and those type of people usually don't follow up, because the Perpetual Wealth Code is not about taking advantage of someone else's lack of opportunity or troubled times. It's about working with what you've been blessed with and multiplying it by helping other people.
Yeah, and being consistent and diligent.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons we work with mutual companies, John. You probably can talk about that better than I can, is that even when we pay our premiums.
Yeah, so what happens in a mutual company is the policy owners are part owner in the company. So it's not like the stock-held companies where you have the customers and the investors in a way pitted against each other.
Yes.
No, in a mutual company, these people are the same people.
Yes.
And so the customers are buying, with a mutual company, they get to share in the profits of the company. So the way the mutual insurance companies work is they charge the premium, and they charge more than they know that they will need to cover their basis. The excess, the profits then that they earn above and beyond what they need, they share back with the policy owners.
Now, a lot of people would say, well, that's kind of like socialism, but it is the exact opposite of socialism, because socialism says you made $5, I made $2.50. We need to put those together and divide it up evenly, and we both get the same amount. Whereas in a mutual company, if you've got $5 in it and I've got $2 in it, we both get profits based on what our share proportionally was in it.
Yeah, that's good.
And that's a value that comes out when we talk to people. And if they're expecting something that is more speculative, more socialistic, can we say, rather than more capitalistic, then it usually doesn't work for them. It doesn't jive with their values, and they kind of weed themselves out.
So in this particular example you gave of this gentleman who wanted to have $1 million in 7 years, that's an okay value.
Absolutely.
But when you look at his income and you look at what he has saved, then that's where the rub is.
And
that's
where,
not
how he intends to get it.
Oh,
yes, and how he intends to get that $1 million.
Yeah, because for another person coming to us and saying, I would like to have $1 million in 7 years, maybe their income, maybe what they're saving, and how they want to use it, it may very well match up and be a very good goal. And so we can't ever just say, this is the way it is. And if you don't, if you fall to the left or the right, that's it.
That's right.
It's not like that.
Something else that comes up is something that Warren Buffett calls the best or the greatest investment you can ever make, and that is the investment in yourself. And he talks about when he took a Dale Carnegie course to learn how to publicly speak, because he would vomit when someone would call him to speak publicly before he took that course. And he said during the course, during the time he was taking that course, his confidence was raised so much that he proposed to his wife.
Oh my!
Okay, so he really
that was a good investment in himself.
Yes, it cost him like $100. Said it was the best investment he ever made. So the thing is how much are people willing to invest in themselves, or are they just expecting this to be a magic pill that they take, and they're never going to have to work at it? They're never going to have to really put any effort or energy into it. It's just going to magically appear, and they're going to live happily ever after. And
it comes down to a values-based thing again.
It's a values-based.
And most of the clients we work with realize that it takes more effort than that.
Yes.
And they're willing to put in that effort. Mm-hmm. But so many of the strategies that are out there, financial strategies especially, when the rubber meets the road, even if you put in the effort, you don't necessarily get the results that you want. And that's what's so beautiful about the Perpetual Wealth Code. If we put in the effort, we have a foundation of guarantees that nobody can take away from us.
Well, John, that's something I really like. When we are talking about the Perpetual Wealth Code and we're using participating whole life insurance, we are actually designing an illustration for that person, whether it's a few $100s a month, whether it's thousands of dollars a month, whether it's 100,000, or multiple per year, depending on what their needs are. They get to see guaranteed results.
Yes.
They get a contract that shows the guaranteed results. And depending on their performance, it can only get better. But they get to see the bottom line guarantee. That's what you will at least have.
Yes.
And there's nothing else that does that.
No. And, we're talking about guarantees here. We said nobody can take it away from you. The guarantees are as guaranteed as we can get in this life. Obviously, if war came, and people ask us about this all the time, well, what if the currency collapses? Obviously, there's going to be changes in all sorts of financial vehicles if that happens. But as guaranteed as we can get on this earth.
Yeah.
That's so true. You've been reading The Black Swan, and that's a really, the little snippets that you've shared with me is really valuable, because we need to behave more like what Jesus talked about in the story of the talents. The story of the talents is one person was given 5, another 2, another 1, and the first 2 people doubled theirs, and the last person buried his in the ground. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of people say that they did that through investments. But, on an investment, what if there'd been a market correction and the Lord returned and there was less than the 5? He did what he did with that talent, that piece of money, in a guaranteed fashion so that it would be doubled when the Lord returned, not if it happened right at the peak of the market.
Yeah.
And so we have to treat the talents that we've been given, the money that we've been giving, as if we don't know what day the Lord is going to come back and give us an accounting. And we need to make sure that what has been given to us is there to return. Mm-hmm. And that's what I like about life insurance, is it takes better than average care of your money. And you do have that guarantee that what you put in will come back to you and be there for you, pressed down and heaped up, just like we talked about.
That's very important. So for those of you listening to the podcast right now, I would encourage you to write in with your questions and comments. You can email them personally to me at John, John, at life-benefits.com, or call our office at 702-660-7000. Now, I know you have this list of characteristics of a successful investor pulled up here with some notes for this podcast. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, Sir John Templeton was a very interesting man, very wealthy man, and a wonderful investor. And he talked about that when everybody's doing something, it's time for you to do the opposite. He was a contrarian. And the reason that he saw that is he realized that the markets are pretty much influenced by the crowd. And sometimes the crowd is influenced by people that are key investors that are trying to get the crowd to move in one way so they can come back and make profit on the other. George Soros is a very wonderful example of how that happens.
Creating lose-win situations and making sure he's on the winning side.
That's correct.
There was somebody in history that did that too. They acted
Rockefeller did that during the time Napoleon Bonaparte was fighting
Rothschild.
The Rothschilds. Yes,
Rothschild.
Yes. So I put on a long, sad face, like this was the end of the market, and he was actually capitalizing on it. Yeah. So, and the reason that can happen is people don't really understand that people can make money when the market crashes, and that's what George Soros is really good at: is setting up things that make a very volatile market where there's a huge correction, and then he just rakes in the profit during that big transfer of wealth at that time. So, but what makes a good investor? Sir John Templeton listed 8 things, and that is, number 1, we have to be humble. We have to realize that we're not controlling this thing. Okay. Number 2, we have to be someone that can accept delayed gratification, which is not very common today. People want it yesterday. That's the American way. Third, we have to be able to control our thoughts. And in doing that, we can then become a calculated risk taker. A calculated risk taker is someone who actually knows what risks they're exposing themselves to, rather than just assuming. And that goes back to the black swan, John.
How do you calculate risk? That's something very tough to do. Even the people who are experts at it really are only pseudo-experts because they get blindsided by things that happen all the time.
And so you limit.
Insurance companies are really good at calculating risk, but I'll tell you what. A few years ago, we had someone who got a preferred policy. She was in the prime of life, got a preferred policy. A few years later, she dies. Completely uncalculated risk. It wasn't an accident. It was a health condition. Uncalculated, but the insurance company are dealing with so many large numbers.
It wasn't an uncalculated risk in the overall picture.
Okay.
And that's where life insurance companies are different than all the experts that try to predict where the market's going to go.
That's so true,
They're
John.
dealing with a large group of numbers and they're narrowing it down to a specific person. That's a true guarantee that we can count on as a foundation. So the way that we become a calculated risk taker is we decide what part we want in guarantees and what part we are willing to risk in who knows what, regardless of what those risk experts are saying.
And most people have that formula upside down because they say when you're young, you can risk so much because you have all these years to make it up. But what they're throwing away is all the compound growth that you could have in a very simple, guaranteed growth that's over those years.
Yes.
And you will have to save more than double. Earn more than double of what someone that is saving at a higher rate than you are to even come close to the first 25 years of what you can gain. And so calculated risk, you calculate the risk by how much you're willing to risk at this time.
Yes.
And
okay, so the first 4, humility, delayed gratification, thought control, calculated risk taker. What's next?
Well, the next thing is you got to be patient because, even though you've done all this, you don't know when the next swan is going to show up.
Yes. Well, that's very similar to number 2, which was the delayed gratification.
That's correct.
Patience.
You got to have patience.
Worth mentioning twice.
and you've got to have a future mindedness. So
that's number 6.
So you've got to think about, what is this going to be worth in the future compared to what it is now? Mm-hmm. A good example of that is when Jeff Bezos left his position on Wall Street, very, very profitable job. And he said to himself, the way he made the decision to start Amazon.com was the fact that when he turned 80, he would not have regretted trying, but he would have regretted failing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we've got to think in the future mindedness like that, okay, and be able to weigh it as if we're in the future right now.
Yeah.
And the capacity to suffer, not only willing, but the capacity to suffer. Bezos was willing to flop, give up his salary, to experience this possibility of the future. And he was willing, and evidently he had some capacity to suffer through that if things didn't turn out right.
Yeah, so capacity to suffer, I don't really like that one. But as we were talking, suffering will come. I mean, it's just part of life. There is suffering, and having the capacity to suffer is better. To suffer with the capacity to suffer than no.
That's an easy one to talk about when you're on the mountaintop.
Oh, yeah.
But when you're in the valley, it's a little bit different. But yeah, it's a true point.
But, and I think in our case, this is don't spend everything in your cash values on some risk, because that capacity that's sitting there is the potential to help you ride through a time of suffering financially.
An emergency fund.
That's true. That's true. And you know what? The capacity to suffer, it's often when we have suffered, I'm using quote marks here, or been challenged, that we find greater growth after that. We can look back on that time and say, wow, I really grew through that time. It's always painful during that process of whatever it is, whatever challenges we face. But when we get on the other side, we can look back and say, that was a really good time in my life. It allowed for this growth, allowed me to be where I am right now.
Yes.
Without that, I wouldn't have what I have today.
And of course, the eighth one here that Sir John Templeton said, we've got to be flexible. And again, not to be redundant, but Jeff Bezos has shown this flexibility very creatively in his company. How many things that Amazon has tried have failed? Think of his phone. That was a big flop. It cost the company a huge amount of money, but he didn't know whether it was going to work or whether it wasn't. But if he never tried it, he would have never known. We've got to be flexible enough to try things.
Yeah. And he could have stuck with being a successful book retailer, but instead he added other product lines on Amazon.com.
Yes.
They added a whole line of web services, which has expanded really just over the last 5 years. It's grown by leaps and bounds and now rivals even some of Google's offerings. It's amazing.
So on this flexibility, though, I do have to say that there's a lot of insurance agents out there, a lot of insurance companies that are talking about the most flexible life insurance policy out there on the market today. And those of you who are longtime listeners, you know what we're talking about. It's Index Universal Life. They talk about all the flexibility you have.
Well, the problem with that, Michelle, is the flexibility's most potent part is on the part of the insurance company, not the client.
Yeah, flexible for who?
Yeah, and it's so flexible that the flexibility takes away the guarantees, because the guarantees always go away on those contracts, and got all this flexibility. So recently we did Christine did a presentation on this, and she had Jordan, her youngest brother, come up with this giant rubber band, and they discussed how flexible these policies are, and really how they can snap back at you. So that we want flexibility in our own selves and in how we view our finances, but we want a good, solid contract with guarantees like we get in participating whole life insurance.
And that's why guaranteed whole life insurance is not an investment. It's an asset purchase.
Mm-hmm.
So
that gives us flexibility.
That gives us the flexibility to invest in other things and opportunities that come along in our life. Mm-hmm. So again, this all has to do around values. It all has to do around what we believe in. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people are afraid to talk about that. They say religion, politics, and money are the three things people don't like to talk about. Money probably is the first thing on the list that people don't like to talk about. The second is religion. The third is politics.
And all three of those things talk about values, right?
And all three of those really reflect our values.
Yeah, hinge on values.
And so anyway, that's who our niche is people that value themselves, value their family, value their creator, and value the fact that we were born to be free and interact and exchange to make and control our own environment and make it better.
So another thing you guys might find this interesting is, we get asked, well, do you have a specific occupation of people? Do you work with doctors? Do you work with attorneys? And of course, people always tend to think of those higher incomed occupations, because usually there's more money that they can spend on things such as financial tools, would you? So recently I kind of made a list. Yes, we do work with some doctors. Yes, we do work with attorneys, but we also work with teachers and policemen and employers. We work with business owners. We work with retired people. We work with bus drivers. I'm telling you, we have several clients that are bus drivers. So it doesn't matter what occupation you're in. Again, it doesn't matter what your income is. What it matters is, what are your values?
Yes.
Do they align with having guarantees? Do you want to have a better financial future? Do you want to create a better future for yourself right now? A better financial picture? Do you want to leave a legacy? Those are the things that determine whether you would be a good client. And if you said yes to those things, then you can call us at 702-660-7000, and we'll be happy to talk with you and, collect some information about the numbers, but more importantly, finding out your values so we can translate that into a guaranteed contract for you.
That's right.
So Michelle and John, until next time when we talk about more solutions, money, and things that create wealth in your life, you have a great rest of the week, and we'll be back here next week.